So you Pesach Daf is Daf Yud Gimel. We're actually up to the mission of Yud Beis Amid Beis, the penultimate mission on the page. So we're continuing to discuss regarding the cities of refuge that are in Miklat. So here we have an interesting case where a person became a habitual shogeg killer. So Harag ba'oiseir, you're sitting there in the Ari Miklat, he killed again, inadvertently. Goyle mishchuna l'shchuna. You can't leave the Ari Miklat because then the Goyle Dam, the next of kin, has the right. The first next of kin has the right to kill you. So within the city, you move from one neighborhood to another. You have to go into exile. So you got to go to another neighborhood. To understand this idea, you just have to think of an ankle bracelet or a home detention. So you can't leave this particular area. What about a Ben Levi? Now remember, we added 42 cities, and all these cities, 48 cities, all belong to the Levim. If a Ben Levi himself, he's already in the Ari Miklat. Nevertheless, he has to go to exile. He's going let me ear. He goes from one of the cities to another of the cities. That's what the Mishnah says. Second, it says the Abisha says to Moshe Rabbeinu, he said, I gave you this place over here that people will run to. And he says to Moshe, I remember Moshe Rabbeinu set aside 3 cities in Ever Yarden, even though they were not functional until the other 3 cities that Yeshua built at the end of the 14 years. And he was scowled upon by Yeshua why he waited till the end of the 14 years before he built them. But nevertheless, Hashem said to him in the midbar, as if he already gave him a place in the midbar. I already gave you in your lifetime already. We'll have the Uri Miklat in the midbar. When we a place, where's the place? Where the Machna Levia was. Remember, Shevet Levi's was the cities of refuge. So where the Machna Levia was, there were 3 camps there. The Machna Levia, and then the Mishkan itself, which is the Machna Levia. So the Machna Levia, that was the safe haven. Ashayonu Shama, they could flee there. Sounds like present. Melamich Yisrael Megal in the midbar. Try to picture in the midbar, nothing better to do than kill people. There's a whole shaila that we learned before that in the midbar, sorry, not in the midbar, we learned that you have to bury someone in the Ori Miklat. You're not allowed to bury the Ori Miklat. Remember we learned before the Ori Miklat, you're not allowed to bury anybody. The exception is the person, the Retzeach, he's buried there. So there's a whole question that Achareim talk about. The midbar kept on moving. So what do they do with these Rotschkim? Do they keep on moving the bones are about, or do they leave them there? And the conclusion of everyone is it never happened. Nobody killed anybody in the midbar. This is just more theoretical. Where do they all go to refuge in the Machlavia? Ben Levi Shaharag. If a Ben Levi killed, normally plach means like a country, and Ir is a city. But over here, plach means a city. So he goes from one city to another city. What happened to him? Gola Lepolcha. He stayed in his city, but within his city, he moved to another neighborhood. He's Polcha Kota. It'll also work. The fact is, he went to exile. Taisa says, other Shem disagree, but Taisa says there's a difference if he goes to another city or if he just goes to another neighborhood, this Ben Levi. The difference is if he goes to another city, he can walk around, he can roam the entire city, including the perimeter, we said, the Tchum. But if he moves to another neighborhood, so he cannot go back to the original neighborhood, he is now locked in that he can only reside in that neighborhood itself and not move out. How exactly do you define a shchuna? Because we live in a shchuna can be three houses already considered a shchuna. So in a city when you have shchunas, how exactly halachically you define a shchuna is not so clear. Micro, how do we know that? He should sit in his imiklota as if past tense. Even in the city that he resides in already, if it's in the city of Levim where imiklot, he can stay there, but just move to another neighborhood. Says the Gemara, says next Mishnah, similarly, flees to the Ir Miklat. He doesn't have to divulge to them why he's there. He moved in. It's only at this juncture when the people of the city want to mechabed him, or he was a big scholar, let's say, or he has other skills, and they want to hear from him. He's articulate, orator. And he needs to confess to them, I am a retzech. They say to him, even so, we want to hear from you. Then you kabel man. You have every right to kabel them as long as you told them. You have to reveal to them who you are. The Mefarshim have a hard time understanding what's the kiyetzivay. Similar to what? So many people omit it, and those who leave it and try to work out how this mission is assimilated to the previous mission. They don't do with each other. Then it says, these people had to, Rashi says, had to pay rent to the Levim. And according to Tais, these people have to pay tax to the city. Let's pay taxes. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. These are words Rabbi Yehuda. Amei says no. The cities were given, designated to they have like sort of a sense of a right of entitlement to go to these cities. No rent. So actually, who were the landlords of the houses? I don't know. If you pay no rent, unless the city built houses, it was more a civic duty on the city. Our Tate says they didn't have to pay taxes. The next case, the what happens? They were a rabbi, and then this happened. Comes and then they're released when the Kohen Gadol dies. Can he be reinstated in his original position? So the first Tana says, Ameya says, he can go right back to his original position. This is only a temporary, absence. And Abiyudah says, that's it. Part of the punishment is you've been demoted. You can no longer go back to your original position. This machlek is whether you pay rent or whether you haven't, or whether it's scot free is only regarding the 6 cities. Remember, there were 6 cities and then the 42 cities of Levim. The Mahasabar, one of them holds, has a pasuk. It should be for you for the Ratzchim. In what sense? How far do we take that lachem? That lachem means leklita, only that you can seek it as a haven or refuge. But why shouldn't you have to pay, for living? Umar savar lachem lechol tzorchechem is completely yours. You don't have to pay a cent. Avol ba'boim v'shtayim, when it comes to the remaining 42 cities, these are normal cities that we also allow you to come. Why shouldn't you pay rent? Omar Rabba says, I disagree. There's no question. Lochem means lochem. We had a more psochim. Lochem means you can have hana from it. Lochem means it's yours. Yours. It means it's yours in every sense of the word. So you don't have to pay rent. So what's going on? So what's the machlekes? Elam Rabba, just opposite. Machlekes baboim v'shtayim. The whole machlekes is regarding the 42 additional cities. The Marsaba, no, it's the original 6 cities. You definitely lochem lechot tzorchechem. You don't have to pay any rent. The question is, these 42 cities, are they exactly the same as the 6 cities, or they're different? So, what does the pasuk say? The pasuk there says, "Va'aleihem," on top of these 6 cities, titnu arbaim v'shtayim. I'll give you another 42 cities. Va'aleihem. Does that? How far do we take the aleim on top? That means it's exactly the same, or they have on top of the 6 cities for refuge. Give me more city refuge, but now it has the same dinim. Just like these. The first opinion says that's only as far as a safe haven. So it says completely yours. The original 60, everyone agrees that one, you don't have to pay rent. Then we have an argument of you get reinstated to your original position, or we say that's it. Part of the punishment is that you're demoted, you're no longer entitled to that original position. Ton Rabban will have the same thing by an Evedivri. Once he's released, the pasuk, does he go back to his original state or not? It says in the Braisa, it says in the pasuk, when he set free this Evedivri, this Jewish slave, he goes free, and it says in the pasuk 2 things. He returns to his family, to his wife and all that, and then it says the El Achuzas Avoisav, to the state of his father. So we dashin Yoshiv l'mishpachta Yoshiv. He goes back. I said sorry, but who's the other voice of Yoshiv? He goes back to the state of his father. So we dashin l'mishpachta Yoshiv. So the Hamed holds we focus on the first part of the pasuk. He goes back to the family. The einu shav l'mashe hichzik. This Rabbi, sorry. The einu shav l'mashe ziko avoisav. The Rabbi holds it says v'shav l'mishpachta. That's all it does. He goes back to his family. Doesn't go back. He says about the state. That's talking about physical, properties in Yerusha, but nothing to do with position. And Ameir says, "Af hu shav l'mash zikavoisav." No, he gets reinstated to whatever he's entitled to, as far as office and so on. Lachuzas avoisav kavoisav. That's clearly lachuzas avoisav, meaning what? Whatever the entitlement is, like his parents. The Chain Begoyla, the Brisa concludes, and the same thing applies to Orim Miklat. Same argument, whether you can reinstate or not. And how's that work? When it says Yoshuv, it says Yoshuv l'Rabbis it says also by the Retzeach the word Yoshuv, that he goes back, and therefore we are going to make a Gzer Shava Yoshuv by Retzeach to Yoshuv from Nevedivri, how far you go back. The time we learned Yoshuv, it says in Pasuk that he waits till the Kohen Gadol dies and passes away, and then Yoshuv Haratzeach El Eretz Achuzasi, he goes back to his original land. It says Yoshuv. So one says he only goes back to his family. The ain't a much doesn't go back to the offices that his parents held. He says he goes back. Why? Because Gomar Shiva Mahasam. He gives a Shava to Eved Ivri. Now, the Ritva comes along, you're very interesting, and he says, why, if we're talking about being reinstated, why is the Torah referred to it as elachuzas avoisa? To say elachuzasai. If we're saying achuzah here means is the whatever his office was, a rav, a leader, parnas, then talk about him. Why avoisov? So he says from here on out that it's a Yerusha. Why is he entitled to be whatever he is? Because he is Yerusha from his father. Father Kohen Gadol, he becomes a Kohen Gadol. His father was a Melech, he's entitled to be a Melech. His father was a Chazan, he's entitled to be a Chazan. And so on and so forth. Because these things are Yerusha, and where do we learn out from a Kohen Gadol? We don't learn out from a Melech, and as the Tzemach Tzedek and the Shuvas explained, there's a difference between a Kohen Gadol and a Melech. Even if they call Mesimus, it goes as a son, that's only limited to a king. Because by a king, it says in the Rambam that another place that a king, when if he has does the next his son who's in succession doesn't have to be anointed unless there are a few brothers, then to avoid machlekes. But you have to be anointed; it's automatic. But a kohen gadol, when his son takes over, needs to be anointed. It's not so automatic. So it's more a chiv that we have to appoint him. It's not a Yerusha is something that happens automatically. You don't have to do anything, and automatically you inherit, your parents. But when it comes to a Kohen Gadol, it's not automatic. You have to. Then is on the community that you have to appoint him as a Kohen Gadol. So that's very different. So it's not a Yerusha. It's not a it's a Yerusha, but a different kind of Yerusha. And that applies to everything else. Where there is a big machlekes and fascinating is, by the way, the exception to all this is, as Al Trevor points out, what he learns the Raj brothers differently, what the minig hamakom is. If the minig hamakom is that you appoint somebody for 5 years, even though you didn't spell it out, you didn't put in a contract and all that, that's how it is. And then if it doesn't yashin, and he himself doesn't have a right to go any more than that. That's why the Rebbe was so upset when in Tavshin Lamed, they appointed the new chief rabbi Shlomo Goren and Rabbi Vadi Yosef, because the previous one, Rabbi Unterman and Nissen, were when they were appointed, it was forever, for life, like before. Rabbi Herzog was for life, or they were all for life, and you just curtailed their appointment. Now it's 10-year appointments or whatever the amount is right now, so that's different. But back then it was not like that. Anyway, but there's a Majdam that says this applies to everything except when it comes to Torah. Comes to Torah, it's not something that you yashin. If your father's a rabbi, it doesn't automatically mean that you're a rabbi. And Torah is different. Others totally disagree, and they say by a Rab as well as Yerusha. And the proof is that Rabbeinu HaKadosh in the end of Ksubas wanted his son Ram Gamliel to take over, even though he had students who were greater than Ram Gamliel. He had students who were greater than Gamliel, but he wanted to give it over to his son, and he appointed his son Gamliel. So we see, and one of the early, but he somewhat shaykh, but he was not as good. He was not the better quality, and some want to say, and I want to say that till Hillel, there was no such thing as a dynasty. When Hillel came along, so it's a dynasty, right? Hillel, Gamliel, all the time. It was a dynasty. And what changed was when Hudas came in and moved in, he took everything over, even though he had no right to, he took away from the Chashmonaim, and he became the king, and then he passed on himself. So they decided, you know what? We need to make sure we have dynasties when it comes to learning Torah as well, because otherwise, we lose out completely. So from Hillel and out, that became the minig. So the dynasty, but no, like this, dynasty by other positions of authority is Mahatayra. We learn from Kohen Gadol, as the Tzemach Tzedek says. When dynasties, when they come to a Rav, if there's a dynasty, and according to the Pasuk, let's say it does pass on to the children, is minig, or let's say midrabanan or minig. One last thing, we learn from here what happens. So the Ritva now goes back to the Ritva. He wants to learn from here. That's actually not the Ritva. In the Achronim, they want to learn from here. What happens? You're a rabbi. The meaning is that goes to the son. You're a rabbi. You got sick for a very long time. Your son was a kid, wasn't capable at all. So they hired another rabbi to step in. But in 5, 6, 7, 8 years, your son now is older. He's a big Talmud Chacham. He's qualified. Does he have the right to push away? And they bring a right from right here. While you're not in mikvah, what happened with this position? Somebody else obviously stepped in. And as soon as you go back, it says right there, you get reinstated. It's a raya that you never lost your right. Others say, no, you can't compare. Over here, you were capable of being in that position. There was a side issue that prevented you from being in that position. In the case of the son, it wasn't a side issue. He wasn't capable at the time. He forfeits his rights. And the argument still continues, and the Torah and all that kind of stuff. Now goes the third Pedic Eilen Aloikin. We're going to mention here a number of Averas that you get Malchus for. And in beginning of Chris's, it lists 36 Averas you get Chorus, and for every Chorus, if we warn you and we're witnesses, you'll get Malchus. So the Eilen Aloikin. Now we don't count all of them, as the Rishonim say. We only count those that have a little bit of a chiddush. The Eilen Aloikin. If I want to get Malchus, if someone has incest, the sister, his aunt, with the sister of his father, sister of his mother, the sister of his wife while his wife is still alive. Valaish is Ochi, even the wife of your brother forever, even if your brother is no longer, unless it's the Yavam. Valaish is Achei Aviv, and your father's brother's wife. Val Hanida and Ananida, these all are chorus, and therefore the witnesses you get Malchus. Almona lekoyin gadol, Almona lekoyin gadol, koyin gadol and Almona again. Malchus. Gerusha v'chalutza lekoyin hedjed, a gerusha and a chalutza lekoyin hedjed. Now, the big machlek is very interesting. Normally, we assume that chalutza is the rabbanon, and we always say, "Why is chalutza? What's chalutza? Chalutza is that you didn't really weren't really divorced. You just severed your ties with a potential husband, your brother-in-law. So it's only the rabbanon because it's similar to get. That's how almost all the Rishonim learn. But Rashi here in this Mishnah, which everybody's perplexed, Rashi says chalutza is mahat Torah, just it's not written explicitly in the Torah. We learn it out from a riboy, whatever it is, but in the Gemara, everywhere chalutza is the rabbanon. Anyway, a kohen hedge is not allowed to marry a divorcee or a chalutza, and therefore you get malchus. Mamzeres unesina liyisrael. A Yisrael is not allowed to marry a mamzeres or nesina. A nation, nesinas are those givonim who masqueraded to be some faraway country, and they were accepted, and they deceived Yeshua. So Yeshua made a decree that you're not allowed to live with them, you're not allowed to marry them. And Rashi is a peller. Rashi says that nesina, in some places, nesina is mahatera, and as what do you call it? Others say that the David HaMelech, and according to that, the David HaMelech was that you shouldn't even treat them. That was a big machlekes by Nesinim. When you say you're not allowed to marry them, is that while they're going? But once they converted, you're allowed to marry them. But even after they converted, you're not allowed to marry them. And then it says here, so Mamre says, "Oh, you get Malchus." Others say it's Malchus Mardus only with the Rabbanon, the sinner. You're not marrying in a sinner after they converted. It's only with the Rabbanon. We don't want having to do with them because they really didn't change their ways. And Bas Yisrael, so to a Jewish girl, is in a mamzer. Now, why in the world you need Bas Yisrael? What's the difference? A mamzer is also, what's the difference? You're a girl marrying a mamzer or a boy marrying a mamzer. No, we would have thought, just like Ammon and Moav, over there we say, Amoini, but Amoinis. By Ammon, you're not allowed to marry someone from Ammon, but only the male. But a female you're allowed to. Same with Moav. Maybe we would have thought mamzer also. So we say the word mamzer doesn't mean a male. Mamzer means mum zar. There's something, a flaw there that's strange to them, not their fault, their parents. Almana grusha chayom la. This woman is an almana and a grusha. She married. First she was a widow, and then she married somebody, and then she became a divorcee, and then a kohen got married. Even though it's one woman, but two different averes, will get to double malchus. Grusha the chalutza ein al chayim shemachas bavad. But grusha chalutza you only chayiv one. and sorry, but everyone else says because only the rabbanon chalutza. And therefore, you give normally Makos Daf. Here you're already getting Malchus from the Torah from being a grusha, and that's enough. But Rashi says, because Chalutz is Mahat Torah, because it's not clearly implicit in the Torah, it's sort of, we have to learn from a Drasha, therefore we'll only give you the Malchus that's Mefurish in the Torah. Yeah, yeah. Double grusha. It's the same shame. We learned before, we'll learn later, the same shame and the same goof, you only get one Malchus. If you only get one Malchus. Yeah, it's talking about the same. Oh, two different. Oh, that's nothing to talk about, of course. It's called Gufas and Mechulakim to people. And if you did a B'Shegig, you bring the number of kabbats. Taking one further, let's get Mishnah continue. If somebody was Tameh, 8 hegdish, you get Malchus. Babala make the Tameh enter the base of the 8 fats. The dam and blood, somebody ate fats, tray for the fats. The chaylev is treifa fats, and the general rule is whatever fats of an animal is brought on the mizbech as a to Hashem is treif to us. That's chaylev to us. The dam and blood, you get malchus and chorus for them. The noisin leftover, if you ate it, the pigel, say the pigel, if you ate it, nobody had in mind the wrong time when you shechted the carbon, the tamei or an animal that was tamei v'hasheichet or something is tamei and ate the carbon v'hasheichet u'mayle b'chutz. If you shecht shchuti chutz, I'm in on the outside, outside the base of Migdash. V'oichel chametz ha'pesach, we ate chametz ha'pesach. V'oichel was malach make a put. If you ate or you did work on Yom Kippur, these were occurrences. Ramafatim is Hashem, and you try to replicate the oil that was done on the base of Mikdash. Ramafatim is Aktedes. You try to replicate the Aktedes that was done on the base of Mikdash. Rasach b'shan Mishcha. You use the oil. There's only one Shem on the Mishcha made by Moshe Rabbeinu, and you took some of that oil to anoint yourself. These are all averas. You get karas and malchus. V'oichel levelus, the treifus. If somebody ate nevelus and treifus, shkotzim v'ramasim, all of these creeper crawlers and all that, these rodents, and for that you get malchus. Ochal tevel u'maiserish. You ate tevel or maiserishin shaloi nitla trumasi. Maiserishin, the coin then has to give. The Levi receives his maiser, then he has to give 10% to the coin. If that wasn't done, so you ate the mais umaiser sheni. Big machik is a shainim. If tevel is only if you didn't remove the trum and the maiser, you also have other obligations. For example, maiser sheni. So let's say I remove the trum and the maiser, but I did not yet remove the maiser sheni. What's the status of this food? Is that also called tevel? Toivloi, you didn't complete it, and therefore you chayiv chorus and all that, or that's already not tevel anymore. You already, the fact that you already removed the trum and the maiser, that means whatever's left over, you still have an achiv of maiser sheni or maiser ani, but we can't call that tevel. That's what someone to bring it out for me. Yeah, very good. Someone say that's a separate things. The hegdish nibdu or hegdish that you didn't redeem, you're not allowed to eat it. How much you eat from table before we say what quantity? I should remember kosher. Doesn't matter what amount. Could remember stalks of wheat, let's say. You ate one stalk of wheat. Doesn't matter what size it is. I'm going to has big size. I'm going to Shimon. Wait a second. You have the money. Aren't you money? You ate a worm. Kosher. I don't care what size it is. If you ate an entire berry, an entire creature, shuchayiv. I'm going to yeah. That's how it was created individually, and you ate the entire thing. When it comes to wheat, why should it be any different? You ate one stalk of wheat. What's the difference? What the size it is? Says the Gemara, the Mishnah. All the examples the Mishnah gives are avedas that you get karas for. Doesn't mention any averas that you get killed for, like in a bezin shalmata. Chayav kizah katani, chayav nisa bezin katani. It says chayav kizah. Doesn't mention chayav kizah. Masnisan mani. Who's the author of Mishnah? Rabbi Kiva. This is Rabbi Kiva. The Tanya we learned. In other words, you're telling me that Eila Heina, like in the following get Malchus, all these people who deserve Kaddish, if they were witnesses get Malchus. Sounds like from here. But what happens if the punishment is, let's say, on Shabbos? The punishment is he gets Skila. And they warned him and they told him, you should know you're going to get Malchus if you're going to be Machal Shabbos. He doesn't get Malchus. Because it's supposed to be, the punishment here is a cap. In other words, whatever Averi you did, if the punishment is you get Misa in a Bezdin, there's no Malchus. Only by Chayav crosses a krisis, where there's no other punishment in the hands of the Bezdin, then they give you Malchus. Because the Mishnah only gives you examples of Averis, which you get Karis. Doesn't give you any examples. Yeah. So the Chayda, our Mishnah follows Rabbi Akiva. What's going on there? Because we have three opinions. Actually, we have four. The fourth one we learn at the end of the Masechta. The Tanya we learned, Echad Chayav krisis, the Echad Chayav Mrs. Bezdin. I don't care what Avera you did. Yeshne b'chal Malchus aboyim. Now, that if they gave you a warning, and right now we think that the warning is even to you're going to get killed. We'll give you Malchus and Misa. We'll give you two punishments. Malchus, you did a lav. Tell you not to desecrate the Shabbos, and you also get killed for desecrating the Shabbos. Divrei Rabbi Shmuel. Rabbi Kiva said, hold on a second. Chayove krisis yeshnei b'chal Malchus. Chayove krisis is no the punishment. Will give you Malchus. Aboyim. And why is that? Because we don't want to give you two punishments, death and Malchus. So Mrs. Bezin, we don't give you Malchus at all. But when it comes to Chayav krisis, you have an opportunity to do tshuva, which means you won't get killed at all. If you don't get killed at all, you got to have some kind of a punishment. So we give you Malchus. She'im also tshuva. If you did tshuva, Bezin Shomayla Moichel, Bezin Shomayla will be Moichel. Aber Chayav Mrs. Bezin ain't a Bechal Malchus. But if you were sentenced in a Bezin here, there's no Malchus. Why? Because She'im also tshuva did tshuva, ain't Bezin Shomayla Moichel. It doesn't help. And why not? If tshuva helps for chorus, for eating chametz on Pesach and not fasting on Yom Kippur, why shouldn't tshuva help? If you ate treif, and you ate treif, you feel terrible. You did tshuva. Why shouldn't Bezin accept that tshuva? So that general, there's a general two ways of looking at it. One way of looking at it is there's a kosov. That's just how it is. Bezin doesn't have the right to accept tshuva. They were not given that I guess legislative right. The other opinion is, how does Bezin know what's going on in your heart? Remember, tshuva is something that has to be real and genuine. Maybe it's crocodile tears. How do they know? They're not in the position to judge. And therefore, Bezin cannot accept. And there's a fascinating Chavaz Yer, it has a very interesting Hakira. A goy who did an Avera that deserves to be killed. Then he became a ger before they killed him. Gershon is guy who couldn't dummy. Do we say now, not only he's a new person, do we say it's like he did tshuva? What better tshuva is than that than become Jewish? And therefore he shouldn't be killed. And he concludes, Bezin has no right, and he concludes that Bezin has no right to accept tshuva. And therefore he has to be killed for the very that he did. Because Bezin has no right. In other words, here, when it comes to becoming a ger, we don't care what's in your heart. The halacha we had in Yavama says once he did it, it's accepted, he's a yid. So therefore, that's tshuva. Bezin doesn't have to know what's going on in his heart. That in itself is an act of tshuva, a reform. And yet, he says you have to get killed. So the Chayil that he holds at least, that what's the union of the Bezin has not the right to accept it, not because we don't know what's really going on in your heart. I don't have time. I'll tell you a beautiful word I once saw in a sefer from America. It's about 200 years old. Another share about this. Anyway, so that's opinion number 2. And he says that not only he said you don't get malchus for krisis. He says you don't get malchus for both. Not only you don't get malchus Mrs. Bezin, you don't even get malchus for karis. And why not? Chayav krisis, according to Rashi, talking about arroyos, or generally with occasionally all malchusin. Anyone who got karis still including all the malchusin. Why? Because every lav you get malchus. Why you being hakas or Russia? We don't care whether you get karis, you don't get karis. So why? Why when it talks suddenly about arroyos is a general law about karis, and suddenly when it talks about your sister, it mentions again you get karis. Karis malchus tell you that all karasin, you don't get malchus. And my time of it, okay, we'll go through. Why not? Why? What's the svara Rabbi Yitzchak we'll see tomorrow. There's a fourth opinion of Chanin and Gamliel. Chanin and Gamliel, which is in Daf Gimel, then the Masechta, he learns over there that Chayave Krisis, he says they get malchus, and that they don't need to do tshuva anymore. The malchus itself takes away the karis, and that's very important with the smicha program that happened 450 years ago, which we'll tell you when we get there. My time, Rabbi Shmuel. What's what Rabbi Shmuel? The Rebbe says, "Im letishma lasas kol divrei Torah." If you don't, it says the pasuk. If you don't watch what I'm saying, well, kol divrei Torah zeis. It says, "What Hashem will do?" Next part says, "V'hivul Hashem is Makos that He will give you makkos." What kind of makkos talking about? How flows? And they what it is because Rabbi Pil Hashem v'koil. Funny we use that expression of hitting, and that's malchus. So it means you get malchus for all the avedas of the Torah. Havim flows do malchusi. Uksiv it says, "Im loy sishma lasas." It's called if you don't salav. No, if you don't, anytime you do a lav. Anytime you over a lav, you get malchus. You get malchus. It's because he flush is malchus. He hoches or chayves in any avera. So if you didn't, let's say, put on film, you should also get malchus. How come we say that only for loisasa? Im loy sishma. It says im loy sishma, and we have a rule. Whenever it says it says either hisham, but be careful, or pen. Perhaps this will happen. V'alo don't. Ain't elasa. These are all different expressions of a loy sasa. That's why you limited malchus to that. Thing we're fine. What about a lav, a passive lav? You did an aveda by not, you didn't do anything. And the rule is we paskin and accept Rabbi Yehuda that lav she'emaisa ain't like in a lav. So the chayil here also we should say you don't get malchus. Oh, it says lasis in that very pasuk. It says lasis, and therefore it says lasis called divrei Torah. You have to be active. That's only when you get malchus. No, what about lav shins? Want to say we also learned the rule. Rabbi Yehuda said the lav that's fixed up by nasei. But if you have the Torah says don't steal, then it says the hatred exela, return the exela, so you can remedy this lav by returning it. You don't get malchus. Why not? Lasa, you didn't have avera and called divrei Torah zeis. So when I say no, I could do me the lav the chsim around where it says it talks about malchus. It says there the lav don't muzzle an animal. Is therefore it has to be like that. It has to be active. It's not literally last say. Now that we're using that as our model, a paradigm for a lav, then we don't need any of the answers we gave before. We need any lav to be similar to muzzling. Okay, so now we understand Rabbi Shmuel. According to this understanding, we'll soon see other explanations. But Rabbi Kiva, my time. So why did Rabbi Kiva say that? No, we don't give you malchus if let's say you mechal Shabbos. The pasuk says that if you understand whatever you have to give the malchus, it says kedei osay for his. It says singular aveda. You only chai for one aveda. You have to mechayv but you don't get. We're not going to punish you. Whatever if you did one act that involves two avedas, we're not going to give you two punishments. No. Rabbi Shmuel. So how can Rabbi Shmuel says that? Sounds like right now we're learning that you'll get misa and malchus. Rabbi Shmuel, Hanimili Misa Mammon. If you did an Aveda that, for example, you burned somebody's house on a Shabbos, we're not going to give you the monetary punishment. You only have to pay, with your life for the skila. because Kamadrabane. We don't give two rishas. Or Malkus and Mammon. If you did an Aveda, you beat somebody up. But we don't give two punishments, Malkus and Mammon. Avon Misa Malkus. But if the Aveda, just a normal Aveda where you get Malkus and you get Misa, we'll give both punishments. You know why? Because Misa Richti. We learned before that Malkus Moka Misa Medes. It's like exactly a slow death, long death. So the way we're learning right now, is you're going to get two. Not if in the case where you don't get killed, we're going to give you Malkus. Even if you don't get killed, we'll give you both. Rabbi Akiva, let's go back to Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva says we don't give two rishas. So how come you get chorus and you get malchus? My Amrit, what did you answer? Because by chorus you can avoid the chorus if you did tshuva. Or by Hashtamid love. The fact is right now you haven't done tshuva yet. So why don't we give you malchus as well? Rabu says because the Feidish Ripsa Torah, the Torah clearly included Chayav Kisel Malchus. The Torah clearly said that someone who gets Karis will also receive Malchus. Where the Gomar, we learn out from two psukim. In one pasuk it says that it talks about Karis, incest. It says here the Nichasu li Eine. Okay, it starts with a prefix of the li, but the word is Eine. And then it talks about Malchus. It says the nikla achicha le'einecha. So it's very similar. The prefix is the same. It has the word eine, but it has the suffix is a chaf. Slightly different, slightly variation, but it's close enough to make a gzera shava. And therefore, the Torah clearly says that you give that part to malchus. So we do eine einecha. Einecha le'einecha talks about malchus. Eine le'eine is talking about chorus, incest. So therefore, we know you get malchus by incest. That's Rabbi Akiva. We have the same word laying over there as well. So let's also say that even if you get killed by a bezin, you should also get malchus. Why? It says in the pasuk over there. It says that that says the prefix is different, but the rest of the words are the same. Why don't you say me'ene from me'enecha? Learn out as well that Mrs. Bezin should get malchus. Says the Gemara, Donin le'ene mileinecha. The prefix is the same in both of them, so that's similar. The ein donin me'ene mileinecha. But to learn, because there's two differences here. If you want to learn from from malchus, if you want to learn from malchus, by malchus it says le'einecha. You have the word me'ene. So first of all, the prefix is different. You have me and the le, and also the suffix is different. They're just eine, and here it says me'einecha. So it's not the same. Says the Gemara, first of all, what's the difference? But Tana Rabbi Shmuel, we bring this down everywhere in Shas. That B'Shava Koyin, a Boa Koyin, Zui Shiva, Zui Bu, when talk about a Koyin in the house that has leprosy, and it goes once and it goes a second time, and we learn the second time, if it didn't spread, you wait another 1 week. We learned the second week from the first week, and here it says B'Shava Koyin, says a Boa Koyin. The word is different, but because that's good enough. So, what do you make it such a big deal? Question number one. Question number two. But who told you should learn from Malchus? Let's learn it from incest, from chorus. Once you know that by chorus you get Malchus, and there it says le'ene, and by Mrs. Bezin says me'ene. Again, there's only one variation, the prefix. Learn it from there. There also is a variation. The suffix is different, and yet that was close enough. So learn the prefix is different, close enough. Says the Gemara, Kibla Minei Rav Shmuel heard from him, whether he heard from Rabbi Wu or Rabbi Mamo, he's in two different opinions, but he heard Kedei Rish Asai. You go back to Kedei, only one single punishment. Can be two. So and goes a bit further. So the question was, so why is Kodesh different? Berisha Hamasura Lebezna Kosmadav. Only the Bezna has control. Mrs. Bezna, not Kodesh. That's that answer. Rava comes along and says, no, you say we're talking about getting two punishments, Malchus and Misa according to Rabbi Shmuel, and Rabbi Kiva says only by chorus. Rava says, no. Depends. Aser Beilik Tola, if you gave Hasra that you're going to get killed for being Mechal Shabbos, not like the previous Gemara, you'll get two punishments, Malchus, and because Misa and Malchus are one long punishment. No. If you were warned that you're going to get killed for this, you'll never get Malchus. Because the Hasra was limited to Misa. Everyone agrees you don't get lashes for this, you'll only get killed. Key pligi, the argument is the Aser Beilik Malchus. Your warning was for Malchus. So Rabbi Shmuel says, okay, you're warning for Malchus, even though normally you get the Misa, we'll give you Malchus. In other words, since you're not getting Misa, we'll give you Malchus. Rabbi Shmuel said, "Well, he says, even though this Aveda really is supposed to be killed, skila, but because you did not get warned for skila, you got warned for Malchus, we'll give you Malchus. So he holds a lav shenitin lazar misabezin, you still get your Malchus because that's what you warned for. Rabbi Kiva says no. Even though you were warned about Malchus, since this Aveda really deserves Misa, you don't get Malchus either. Now, if you know lav shenitin lazar misabezin ain't like in the love. You don't get Malchus. So the obvious question is, what about Chorus? So how come you say by chorus you will get the Malchus, but it's a lav shenitin la chorus as horus chorus. The lav was set aside to tell you you're going to get chorus. What about Chris says lav shenitin lazarus chorus? The Torah says don't do this. The Torah meant that the punishment will be chorus. So why are we giving Malchus? They don't need either Azhara or Hasra. The Torah does not have to give you a warning. We have a rule. You don't get punished unless there's a law that says something in the Torah. Not when it comes to Kosher. The rule does not apply to Kosher. And I'll prove it to you. You don't have to be pre-warned. So if there's a law, the Torah is a law, it must be from Malchus. Now, why the world Kosher doesn't need a warning? They just like a bezin cannot mete out a death sentence unless the Torah somewhere else gives you a warning. So why doesn't Kosher have the same rule? So I'll prove it to you. There are two mitzvahs two positive mitzvahs, Pesach and Milah, that if you don't do a korban Pesach or if you don't circumcise, you get kares. Two averes. And yet, honest, you get punished. Afa pishla is it. Then you get punished. There's no lav. There's nowhere does the Torah say, don't you dare not bring a korban Pesach, or don't you dare not, do a bris milah. All positive mitzvahs, and yet you will get kares. What does that prove? We don't need a warning in order to receive kares. So when there are warnings, it's for Malchus. That's what Kiva says. But why should it be different? Why? The fact that you can get kodesh where there's no warning, no lav, no zon say that the lav has no bearing on this. Lav, I say, makes no difference. Either takes a loy, that's from Malchus. But who said maybe the rule is, what happens if you don't bring a korban Pesach? You don't bring a korban chatzas for that. What happens if you don't get circumcised? You don't bring a korban chatzas. But for all these other avedas, if you did a mistake, by mistake, you bring a chatzas. Maybe that's what the Torah says, loy, to tell you that for these things you bring a korban. The Duma has harder the korban, and I prove it to you. But Pesach and Milah, the lesbu has harder. There's no warning. The maisi korban. Doesn't that prove that you need the lav to tell you to bring a korban? But what's my proof? Because Pesach and Milah, when there's no lav, you don't bring a korban. Says Gemara, no. Hustle when it comes to korban lav hainu time, it's nothing to do with the lav. And from the iskish kol atoyda kul avodah zarah. The entire Torah is compared to avodah zarah. Not only Shabbos, but also entire Torah. It says in the pasuk in Shlach, if it's hidden from your eyes, we talk about the whole Torah from avodah zarah. Hustle lav hainu time. The reason is elam mishum the iskish kol atoyda kul avodah chavim. Ma avodah chavim sheva al taisa. Just like avodah zarah. Don't do this. So how do you fulfill this mitzvah? By not doing anything. And what happened by the Zorah Shagi? You bring a korban. So all Avedas with that way to fulfill the mitzvah by not doing anything, you bring a korban. I don't need to tell you loises. It's the Shabbat Taisa that you shouldn't have done anything. But when it comes to Pesach and Milah, you're supposed to do something. And what happened? He didn't do what he's supposed to do. There's no korban for those kind of things. It's not like Avodah Zorah. Of course, what Taisa Lafuki Hani Kuma say you're supposed to do something. Usually, yeah. But from a different angle. So therefore, why does the Torah say loy? You don't need it for korban. You don't need it for kares. Must be to get malchus. That's how the Kiva's view. Ravina says no. Let's go back to that first answer. Loy give me mekara. The answer is she must tshuva ben shamayim moichle. If you did tshuva, bez will be moichle. My Yoma, what's he going to say? Holo over tshuva. The fact he didn't do tshuva. So yeah, that's the question. But the point is, like psika milsa lekaris. Since you cannot always say that you will get kares or you won't get kares, since we don't know, therefore you can't. We don't know if you get kares in the future. When do we say we get malchus? When do we say we get malchus? Only we know for sure you're not going to get killed. For example, you only warn for malchus. But here, we never know whether you will get killed or you won't get killed. So, sorry, again. Rabbi Kiva says, when do you say we don't give malchus? We know for sure you're going to get killed. The Bezdin is going to pass him that you're chayiv and you're going to get killed. Over here, even after you do Veda, how do you know you get kares? Maybe you'll do tshuva, maybe you won't do tshuva. And therefore, because we don't know for sure you're going to get killed, we have to give you malchus. Yeah. Yeah. You should go back to this. Rabbi Kiva said because two dishes. We can't give you two punishments. I chayav krisas. We ask the question is also two dishes. So how come by chayav krisas we do give punishments? Answer is it's not. When do we say you cannot do two dishes? When we know for sure you'll get two dishes. Here we don't know for sure you get karis. So therefore you no longer call two dishes. The bezin should administer malchus because we don't know for sure you're getting two here. So only when you for sure you're going to get two punishments, malchus and misa, bezin say, okay, we'll only give you a misa and no malchus. But we don't know about karis, whether you do or not. Okay, we'll stop reading tomorrow at 7 o'clock in Mitzvah. Have a good day.